Welcome to Jerusalem Studio Podcast. Join us to discuss the latest updates from Israel and the region.
Hello and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. In late August and early September, Israel and the Palestinian militant Islamic organization Hamas, which rules the Gaza Strip and its 2 million inhabitants, seemed headed towards a lengthy ceasefire with an improved lot for the poor and desperate population and relief from attacks and anxiety to Israeli civilians across the border. But these hopes were dashed partly because of moves by Palestinian Authority President Mahmud Abbas, who wants to regain control over Gaza. Are Hamas and Israel now back on the warpath? Here to analyze the situation and predict what's next in this volatile part of the Middle East are Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, Reuven Ben Shalom, cross-cultural strategist and columnist at the Jerusalem Post. Hello. Brigadier General in the Reserves, Yossi Kuperwasser, project director on Middle East developments at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, and Dr. Dikla Cohen, research fellow at the Truman University, Hebrew University.
Hello.
Dr. Cohen, a simple question. What is going on?
Actually, we have witnessed two parallel lines of escalation on the one hand and de-escalation on the other hand. We watch escalation every day and every night because the Hamas works by shifts nowadays. At the mornings and at nights, we see the burning balloons and kites. And on the other hand, we hear of de-escalation about talks with mediating of Norway or the Egyptian intelligence about an agreement between Israel and the Hamas. That's the main situation, let's say, at the last fortnight.
These two lines of effort can coexist without any decision on the part of the Hamas leadership where they are headed?
I believe the time is running out.
Yossi Kuperwasser?
I think Dikla is right, but these are not parallel and contradicting processes that are happening. These are two things that complement each other. By the use of force and violence along the border, Hamas believes that it's going to be able to force Israel, to force the Egyptians, to force Abu Mazen to be more flexible on the issue of the reconciliation between the parties inside the Palestinian street and get a better deal for Hamas. That's what they believe. It's like a billiard game. Are they going to be able to be successful? It's not clear because Abu Mazen doesn't see what does he gain out of it. And as long as he doesn't get everything he wants, he's, at least for the time being, playing the card of unable to change his mind. And all the efforts of the Egyptians fall short of persuading him to change his position. So we shall see probably more violence in an attempt to convince the Egyptians to do something more convincing vis-a-vis Abu Mazen. And but at the same time, I think that Hamas understands that there's a limit to up where it should go with the violence. They don't want to break the situation altogether because they're afraid that Israel will change course and instead of trying to convince Abu Mazen, will take action against Hamas directly, which Israel doesn't do it for the time being. And we saw in the previous round when Israel decided to take action against Hamas. That's how we reached the more quiet period in late August, because at that time we closed the Kerem Shalom, we took some action against sensitive targets of Hamas. Hamas doesn't want to go back there. So this is a very sophisticated brinkmanship situation, especially by Hamas, but not only by them, and everybody's playing this game. And in brinkmanship, it's about how much patience and how much self-confidence you have. And that's just to be judged by the events.
And there are also domestic political repercussions in Israel. We hear various ministers attacking each other as either too moderate or too extreme. This is part of the game, of course.
Of course, but this doesn't necessarily reflect real differences of opinion about what should be done. it's much more political in my mind than really where is the solution.
Reuven, what options does Israel have when everybody knows, because the current government and even the previous government, which was headed by the same prime minister during Operation Protective Edge, declared in so many words almost that he doesn't want to occupy Gaza for various reasons. Of course, he doesn't want to take this burden of occupation upon itself, and it is not going to advance Israel's interests anyway. But now it is also saying that it doesn't see the point of striking Gaza from the air, because if it does for the fourth consecutive time since late 2008, no outside donor in their right minds are going to contribute to the reconstruction of Gaza. So where does that leave Israel? What options does it have?
You know, it's not like we have a campaign to win, and now what are we going to do? What means do we have? What do we want for Gaza? For Gaza to thrive. And by the way, it's even easier in a way from looking at the entire Palestinian issue with one state. With Gaza, it's even more simple. There's this small strip of land. Just live here and thrive with us. And by the way, if we would have 2 years of quiet, the borders would open. It would be like Judea and Samaria. Tens of thousands of workers will come in. They would have a seaport, and they will lead a better life. So you're right that we have no aspirations to go back in to conquer the place. I'm sure that the next campaign will look very similar to the previous ones, which means Hamas will get beat pretty hard. There'll be 3,000 Palestinians dead. Infrastructure will be there in rubble. And then the international community will wake up again to start the rehabilitation process. Unfortunately, there's no strong international force to come in at this point in time and say, no, let's prevent that at all cost. What we see now is really ridiculous, because what are we saying here now? We're saying that the international community is led by Hamas PR to see the situation as if the problem is Israeli siege or blockade, right? And just lift the blockade and save the Palestinians from their dire humanitarian situation. That's how they see it. In reality, as we all said, we see the formula. The formula is that for Hamas, the only means of expression, the only means for them to reach some kind of international ear is by promoting violence on the fence. And by the way, they trigger it masterfully. When they want it, it happens. When they want it to stop, it stops. So we see this formula. This is their means of expression. And in a way, they have no choice. And for the last month, by the way, everyone that I asked reporters and security officials, everyone says war in October. But why? Why? Because it's almost like they have no choice, and they're being led down this funnel, and it's gonna be expressed in a war that will lead to nothing.
It's a very fatalistic, deterministic school of thought. Dr. Cohen, Reuven a moment ago alluded to President Trump when he said one state, two states, but there is also the three-state solution. Another partition of Palestine, this time not between Arabs and Jews, such as in the UN resolution of 1947, but that piece of property which is under Palestinian control, partitioned between the West Bank under Mahmud Abbas and the Gaza Strip under Hamas. Is that a viable option?
Well, I'm not sure, because the first thing we have to see is where the reconciliation between the Fatah and the Hamas goes. The situation now is there's a new formula suggested by the Egyptians, and they are about to meet in the few next days and to discuss things between them. I believe the talks about reconciliation between the Fatah and Hamas will affect everything else, because when we are thinking of it, there must be one head in front of the Israeli government. We can't talk to two heads separately.
General Kuperwasser, you were head of military intelligence assessment research in the years when the Oslo process started to disintegrate, when there were so many terror acts, and when Yasser Arafat gave way to Mahmud Abbas and Israel evacuated Gaza. Is the fact that once Gaza becomes an independent state, independent of the West Bank, the Palestinians will have 2 votes in the United Nations. Is that an incentive enough?
Well, this is not an incentive, but I think that it's not. Israel cannot say, doesn't have a say in this issue. It's the point is that from an Israeli point of view, we can live with this division. It's not a problem for Israel, and as long as in each area you have somebody with an address who controls the means of violence and can provide some sort of an arrangement, then it's good it's acceptable for Israel. I'm not saying maybe it's not good, but it's acceptable for Israel. And we do have an address in Gaza. The address in Gaza right now is Hamas. I don't think that these reconciliation efforts are going to convince Hamas to give up Gaza. Even if they are ready to see people from Abu Mazen's political wing, the Fatah and the Palestinian Authority, taking some control on the surface, they are not going to relinquish their military control of Gaza. And Abu Mazen understands that he doesn't want to be a puppet in Gaza. So he doesn't want to come under these arrangements, these conditions. And because of that, the reconciliation efforts are going on for more than 10 years. They never succeed because just like Hamas is not ready to give full authority to Abu Mazen. Abu Mazen, of course, couldn't even dream of having Hamas people, military or armed people present in the West Bank. So this is an effort that is failing again and again and again. We have to realize what is the situation on the ground. The situation on the ground that there are two separate Palestinian entities. One that is very, very much like a state, which is Gaza, and one that is almost as much like a state as the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. And we should live with this situation, and we are doing it in a way. The problem is that we consider the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank as a legitimate interlocutor, whereas we consider Hamas as an unlegitimate interlocutor. So we have to find ways to communicate with Hamas without directly communicating with them. But we have managed to develop these ways throughout the years, and the fact is that we live with the Hamas in Gaza. Definitely Israel doesn't have to make an effort in order to bring Fatah to Gaza. All these ideas that the Fatah will come to Gaza over our rifles are, of course, bayonets. These are ridiculous. Israel, to think that any Israeli will put his life in danger for that to happen is ridiculous. So it's up to the Palestinians, and the Palestinians have a very big difficulty. I was speaking with Egyptians many times about this matter, and they always convince themselves that they found some formula that will make it happen. I was telling them, listen, if this formula doesn't have a solution for the armed presence of Hamas in Gaza, it's not going to happen. And we have to realize that this is the case, unfortunately.
And what about the Hudna speakers? What about those of the pragmatic Hamas who speak of Hudna?
No, they're not pragmatic. They are realistic.
Hudna is a longer ceasefire.
No, yes, but they're realistic. They're not pragmatic.
Okay.
And they, just like the rest of Hamas, and by the way, like many in Fatah, they still believe that what is the incentive for this violence, this dream that they will manage to penetrate and take over Israel. This is what keeps this going. Even the realistic people in Hamas wouldn't like to see that disappear. So even the realistic people in Hamas don't say that they should give up the control of Gaza and give up the military presence. They are ready to make all kinds of more sophisticated arrangements than the more radical elements. But still keep the control of Gaza, because the control of Gaza is the most important asset that Hamas managed to acquire. To give it up, it's too much for them, and they are luck into it. And another thing that happened to them, in the early rounds, they were a part of a winning group, a winning camp. The Muslim Brotherhood, after 2011, was gaining power, and they thought that they can use that.
The wave of the future.
The wave of the future, and the Western world was supporting it and, under Obama. So they thought that they can do something. But today, Muslim Brotherhood is on the losing side. If they try to and hope that the Iranians will help them, that's also very remote. because Iran is now under pressure. So they don't have any leverage they can use in order to change the situation. The only thing they can is to hope that Israel will put pressure over Abu Mazen. It's how much pressure are we going to put on Abu Mazen?
Reuven, we have focused in the last several moments on the return or most probably no return of Fatah and the Palestinian Authority to Gaza. But what about the other direction? We all remember that the last time there were elections in the Palestinian community on both sides of the fence, 12 years ago, when Condoleezza Rice demanded free, full, and fair elections, such as they were, Hamas won. And Hamas established a government which, in effect, ruled Gaza even before it took over the Gaza Strip by force, while Abu Mazen stayed on as president. What would happen if there were new elections for the presidency as well as for the Palestinian parliament? Would Hamas also take over the West Bank?
Unfortunately, in the long run, I think that there's a good chance that Hamas will someday take over the hearts and minds in the West Bank. And by the way, it shifts throughout the years, and I think since we're towards the end, I don't want to say anything bad about Abbas, but look at his age, okay? He's not going to be here in 30 years, okay? So, but the next leadership of the Palestinian Authority, who knows what it's going to be, and there could be a major shift in the street, in the Palestinian street. I think Hamas, because their goals, as General Kuperwasser said, are really the strongest as far as long-term national aspirations, and they can easily portray the Palestinian Authority as collaborating with Israel, giving up the Palestinian aspirations. I think it's pretty easy for Hamas to convince the Palestinian street to be on their side. So I think it would be easy for them to sweep the Palestinian street. Remember that our physical presence in the West Bank is different than Gaza. So militarily, and as far as professionally countering terror, I think we have the ability of preventing anything from springing up from the military terror perspective, and we've been doing a good job for decades now. But as far as politically, yes. And every time we talk about Hamas and Gaza, I think we make a mistake of thinking as if they only care about that. It's not only that they want to kill us and throw us the what would they call us, the brutal invaders, okay? But certainly they want to take over the Palestinian Authority. This is a major clash. Unfortunately, right now, they can't look reality in the face, understand that they have failed. I'm not saying some Israeli propaganda now. They failed miserably at managing the Gaza Strip, right? They failed. That's why they're in this situation. That's why their finances are plummeting. They can't accept that reality and maneuver a bit and enable the Palestinian Authority to take over at least some civilian capacity.
General Kuperwasser, what is the scenario for the day after Abu Mazen regarding the Palestinian security organizations, which we are told have become more professional under American guidance and other British, Canadian, what have you, and perhaps there are too many of them, and no one has emerged as the most important organization headed by a clear-cut successor whose authority will be accepted by the others. Can Israel count on their professionalism if Hamas tries to take over the West Bank?
Well, no. In one word, no. But much depends on how the political echelon is going to behave after Abu Mazen leaves the stage. So far, we haven't seen any agreement in between the potential successors of how this succession is going to look like. And it seems that they will not be able to reach such an agreement as long as Abu Mazen is there. So it might well be that there's going to be some clashes between the
Is there no retirement plan for Arab leaders? They always seem to die in office or be ousted violently.
Who knows? Abu Mazen said many times he's not going to compete in the next elections, but then again, he's not going to have any next elections, so it's an oxymoron. I think that Abu Mazen is going to be there, and even though he's not young, he seems to be in reasonable health, and he can still hold the reins for a while. What's going to happen afterwards? If the security forces are going to take control of the situation, maybe led by Majid Faraj, the head of the preventive security, then they will be able to confront Hamas in the West Bank, especially as Israel is present there. We saw what happened in the Gaza Strip. The moment we left, the security forces couldn't resist the power of Hamas. The West Bank is a little bit different story, although Reuven is right that when they appeal to the people with their zeal and the commitment to the national and Islamic also, it's very important, the Islamic nature of the Palestinian people, as they presume it is, they have much more power than the Fatah that seems to be too corrupt, too fragmented, and they definitely have a chance, a good opportunity there. But Israel is present there. It's not the same thing. Israel can, unlike Gaza, what I said before, in the West Bank, Israel can intervene in order to prevent something like that from happening. And that is something that's an element that we have to take into account.
Many Palestinians, though, fear from total anarchy, what they call fawda. They say when Abu Mazen leaves the stage, there's chances to total anarchy.
Let me tie this question to another one, and that is the prisoners, the various deals that are being touted regarding the release of Palestinian prisoners, security prisoners, those who were convicted for terror-related crimes, in exchange for the release of 2 Israeli civilians held in Gaza and the remains of 2 Israeli soldiers who were killed 4 years ago. The connection is Marwan Barghouti, the Fatah leader who was convicted for 5 counts of murder 16 years ago, and who is mentioned as one of the possible contenders for Abu Mazen's succession. Why is the big deal or the small deal regarding the prisoner release being delayed? And should Israel, out of its own self-interest, include Marwan Barghouti in this deal?
Okay. I believe the main reason for postponing the agreement is the held Israelis. That's what we've heard. There was an agreement about reopening the Rafah border. There was an agreement about reopening the Kerem Shalom border, but as long as we heard reports about the talks about the held Israelis, and that was the red line as far as Israeli officials are concerned.
What about Barghouti?
Barghouti still has many time to do in jail. He killed many Israelis and is responsible for the killing of many Israelis. I don't believe he's a true actor in the gameplay after Abu Mazen is gone.
General Kuperwasser, you were in charge of intelligence for the Central Command when Barghouti was just an activist before he became a terrorist. Can he go back to being a political leader?
First of all, he's still a political leader, even from jail. His voice is heard and people support him. And as a matter of fact, when you do all kinds of polling about who's the best candidate to succeed Abu Mazen, I think he usually comes first.
And we helped also boost his image, didn't we? In a way.
No, we did not. But
By putting him in.
Some
prison.
did. Some did. Depends who's we. But I think that Israel cannot release Barghouti. It's like it's a no-go option for Israel, and because of that, Barghouti is not going to replace Abu Mazen. What I think is that the question of the prisoners is something that Hamas got used to expect some really big yield out of holding them in their hands. And Israel is not willing to pay the same price that it paid for Shalit for
7 years ago.
7 years ago now. And it's difficult for Hamas to accept it because they were accustomed to this kind of deals, the Jibril deal. and
Especially since the current head of Hamas in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, was released on this deal and promised his friends who stayed in jail that he will try to release them.
It's very difficult to overcome this problem. But the other issues, as Dikla said, the Kerem Shalom crossing is open. It's not closed. And even the Rafah crossing is open most of the time. So what exactly is Hamas expecting? It's more jacuzzis to come into Gaza. What is exactly their problem? They want to feel a relief while being able to keep preparing themselves to the next big confrontation with Israel. They want to be able to get the cement in order to build the tunnels. They want to get all kinds of weapons that they need in order to build the naval commando, their night squads, their whatever. Israel cannot ease the terms of the commerce and the trade that's happening between Gaza and the rest of the world.
Colonel Ben Shalom, I'm very disappointed that you, not only you personally, but all of the guests here, because we've been talking for 26 minutes now, and we haven't solved the Israeli-Palestinian problem, not even the Gaza corner of this problem. So you still have a minute to come up with some magic solution.
I have a solution. I really have a solution.
Let's hear.
When women lead Israel and Palestine, or the Palestinian Authority, we will have peace. But until that happens...
By the way, some 45 years ago, Henry Kissinger said that the three women he knew as prime ministers, that is Indira Gandhi, Benazir Bhutto, and Golda Meir, led their nations in war. But perhaps the new crop of
By the
leaders.
way, I didn't say that as a joke. I think when we have women in leadership, maybe we'll see a shift in more the human aspects of this, because right now it's not looking good. I just wanted to relate to the issue of the prisoners. Personally, I think someday Marwan Barghouti is going to be the president of the Palestinian Authority or whatever entity it may be. And it could come about when we have an agreement and we release prisoners. That happens. We released terrorists in the past. The fascinating thing here is that after the Shalit deal, I think the Israeli society and the Israeli government understood that we're on the wrong track, that we're weak. We project weakness and we're down on our knees. And there was a committee that its results were never disclosed. But I'm guessing from what we see now that probably there's a major shift, major change in Israeli policy. And it's positive and it's good. We have to play tough, especially when we're talking about remains of soldiers. We don't have to give back almost anything. The fact that Israeli citizens wandered into Gaza and are still there, that's a big problem, and I think also a problem of the international community that didn't help us enough.
One quick response from each of you. These last 4 years have been the longest since the early part of the last decade without a major operation or campaign. How long can it last until the next one?
I believe only a few months.
Yossi, Kuperwasser?
Well, it depends what's a major confrontation, but a big confrontation may take more time because everybody has...
Months, unfortunately, sadly.
Thank you all, Reuven Ben Shalom, Yossi Kuperwasser, and Dikla Cohen, and we will see you next time. Shalom from Jerusalem.
Thank you for joining us in another Jerusalem Studio podcast. For more content on Israel and its region, we invite you to visit our website at tv7israelnews.com and follow us on social media.